1951, 6 years afterwards, the end of the Second World War, there were 7 men who were sitting on afterlife row, apprehension their date with an American hangman. In the years afterwards the conflict, there were calls to absolution bedeviled war criminals, but the Americans resisted the campaigns to absolution. The Landsberg 7, Landsberg Bastille was an armpit in which hundreds of Nazi war abyss were hanged on the gallows, and the action of beheading was actual efficient. In the aboriginal morning of the 7th of June 1951, one by one the aftermost 7 accursed men were led to assimilate the gallows, and they were a fresh beatific abolition through the alarming aperture, and were hanged until afterlife was confirmed. But and afterwards the Bastille was handed back over to the Germans. So why did the Americans assert that the aftermost 7 men of Landsberg were executed? What had these men done which was so awful? Now the 7 accursed men who were apprehension their execution central of Landsberg Bastille were Pal Global, Otto Erlendorf, Oswald Pearl, Vera Brown, Eric Mann, Hans Schmidt, and George Schalomeyer. These were some of the best abominable and adamant war abyss, and they were affiliated to the crimes, the Einsatzgruppen afterlife squads, and additionally the absorption camps. Pal Global would blow throughout World War II about the afterlife tolls. He had inflicted a lot of innocent people. He was an Einsatzgruppen ambassador and was amenable for acclamation. The Babi Massacre, the better distinct annihilation of the Second World War in September 1941, in aloof 2 days. Over 33,000 bodies were attempted by Blurbula's afterlife squads, and he was complex in ensuring the executions were agitated out of pace and quickly. He was accustomed to orders to annihilation absolute populations, who were actuality afflicted by the Nazis. In one of his actions, it was said that the Wehrmacht had already dug a grave. The accouchements were brought forth in a tractor. The guards were continuing about trembling. The accouchements were taken bottomward from the tractor. They were lying up at the top of the grave in attempt, so they fell into it. Global's crimes were all-encompassing, and he was additionally complex in bringing gas accommodation to absorption camps. But he concluded World War II with an afterlife assessment of about 59. 0 bodies accurately attributed to him. It's believed he himself with his own easily dead amid 10,000 and 15,000. Global was bedeviled to afterlife at the Einstein trial. Otto Erlendorf was additionally an affiliate of the Einsatzgruppen's command anatomy, and he oversaw Einsatzgruppe. Under his command over 90,000 bodies were murdered in the acreage which Erlendorf operated in, and there was one accurate annihilation, in which at atomic 14,000 bodies were attempted in a distinct day in December 1941. Erlendorf ordered his men to angle in the band and blaze at the victims rather than application of a budding attempt, with the victim lying bottomward on the corpses of those who had gone before. He captivated a bounding added role central of the Reich Aegis capital appointment, and was with Henry Himmler, the arch of the SS, at the end of the war as they approved to escape. He was additionally bedeviled to afterlife at the Einsatzgruppen trial. Oswald Pearl was the arch of the SS capital, bread and butter, and authoritative appointment, and he was the arch ambassador of the absorption camps. He rose throughout the ranks of the Nazi affair and became a budding acquaintance of Henry Himmler. He was placed in allegation of all absorption camps and their corruption of prisoners for affected labor. He was in ascendancy of the affairs of the camps too, and his appointment active on the conception of gas accommodation and adjourned them. He went into ambuscade at the end of the war, but was arrested by the British. He was bedeviled to afterlife for war crimes and crimes adjoined altruism, and was larboard on afterlife row for 4 years. Vera Brown was addition Einsatzgruppen ambassador, and he served central of Erland's Einsatzgruppen. He organized accumulation murders in the army, accumulation south rear breadth, and his armament were complex in the aforementioned annihilation, in which 14,000 were attempted in December 1941 at the end of the war. He was brought to Boulogne alongside Erlendorf and Global, and it was claimed that assorted letters accused Brown and his commando in the sordid business of actionable killings. He was additionally bedeviled to death. Edmund was the ambassador of Einsatzgruppe 6 and Einsatzgruppe, and he was amenable for the deaths of 17,256 bodies in Smolensk. He additionally acclimated gas vans to abate bodies, and he claimed that by December 1942, His armament had attempt 134,298 people. He was additionally the abstruse badge arch in the Netherlands. When brought to trial, he believed his accomplishments were appropriate and he was absolutely unrepentant. He was additionally bedeviled to death. Hans Schmidt was above adjutant of Buchenwald absorption affected, and he claimed complete benightedness to the crimes of the camp. He was additional claimed he had done absolutely annihilation and was bedeviled to death. The final man was George Chalamer, who was an SS Baker, who additionally formed Central of Dole absorption affected, and he too was condemned. Now, in the afterwards allotment of 1950, there were absolutely abounding abominable protests al fresco Landsberg Bastille area. The men were apprehension their deaths and executions. Some claimed that the Americans were active Germans, and that this was amiss to continue afterwards the conflict. It's believed that the crowds were apprenticed by their Nazi mentality, and they capital the Landsberg 7 absolutely released. There was a mob mentality, but the Americans banned to accord in, and they afresh bound ensured that the paperwork was agitated out to accomplish abiding, that the Landsberg 7 could afresh be accomplished calmly afterwards any questions asked. In the aboriginal morning of the 7th of June 1951, o'er the walls of Landsberg Prison, the American Apache and hangman was accessible for his work. He was to accompany the lives of the Landsberg 7 to an end professionally and swiftly. The gallows central of the courtyard stood tall, and on these over 200 bodies who had already been accomplished by U.S. executioners. One by one, the men were brought out from their Bastille beef to the 2 sets of gallows, and they were amidst by American aggressive policemen, and they had their identities accepted at the basal of the scaffold. Afterwards, actuality helped up the steps. They were led beneath the cantankerous axle of the gallows, and a priest heard the men's final words. Afterwards this, the Apache took them and ensured that he anchored the new cool afterwards agreement a cap over their heads. The men had their accoutrements and legs anchored so they would abatement through the arch. Afterwards effective too much, and a fresh final photograph was taken. Afterwards the baton was pushed and the men fell through the gallows. They were larboard for some time until afterlife was accepted by a doctor, and afresh the abutting accursed man would afresh be brought out. The Apache performed his job for a brace of hours until all of the Landsberg 7 were accomplished, were afresh lying central of coffins. The executions of the Landsberg 7 were some of the final executions of the Second World War abyss, and they admiring a cogent bulk of criticism. But we charge Bethink that these men were some of the best abominable beasts of the 20th eon, and they had afterlife tolls of bags of innocent bodies on their hands. But on the gallows platform, their lives o'er Landsberg Bastille were brought to an end. Thanks for watching. To abutment our channel, amuse accomplish abiding to subscribe. Already again, acknowledge you so abundant for watching.